So, good morning to everybody here. I'm very happy to be here and share with you this very day. At the beginning, I will apologize for my not so good English. I will try my best, and I hope they will understand me. And I will also speak freely, so improvise in a way. Yes, as it was said, I got in touch with Felsted and this oratorio 20 years ago, so a lot of time was passed. And when I saw the score, it made click in my head, and I said, so this is fantastic music, but it's not all. It's like a piece of gold which has been in nature, and you don't see, you don't realize the gold or the content of the piece. And I thought, and lots of ideas came to my head. And now, to explain what happened and what I did, I want to make a little trip to the past. A trip to the past. It's the 18th century, and the music situation in the New World. That means South America and the Caribbean and also North America. People always were interested in music. Not everyone, of course, but certain people with certain cultural niveau. And there was a big difference between what happened in music in South America and the rest of America. I will explain you what was the difference. In South America, there were the Jesuits, you know, this Christian people that made by order of the King of Spain and of Portugal the reductions, Indian reductions, or reductions for Indian and also for black people which has been slaves in those times. In these reductions, they were safe. They were safe from the farmers and the people that they want to take them again as slaves, as workers, and they could live free, but under one condition. The condition was that they had to go to school and they had to take lessons from arts and from music. Yeah, so these people living in these reductions had lessons of music. They learned violin, flute, harpsichord, lute, all those instruments from this time. And then happened something very interesting. They became so good, they were so musically, they became so good that, for example, for the big I would say like Eastern and Christmas and the big feasts of the Christian church, they called these musicians because they were better than the professionals in the big towns like Lima, Cordoba, Buenos Aires, and so on. They were really extremely good musicians. And of course, there were also composers writing pieces for these people. The situation in the Caribbean, like Jamaica, was completely different. So the musicians and composers had a standalone situation. There was no institution which helped them, and maybe the church, of course. But now we are coming to Samuel Felsted. He wrote, as we know, the oratorio Jonah. And he has left the score, which was printed 1775. When I saw the score, I realized, wow, that's very good, but that's not all. And I tried to imagine the situation of Felsted. He said, okay, I have a great idea. I want to write this oratorio. So I have some singers. I'm playing the organ, of course, no problem. And maybe I have very few musicians. around me. Maybe a violin or not, or maybe an oboe or not. So the situation to perform was very reduced, but his ideas were very big. So as everybody, every composer has the idea to make something big, but if you don't have the possibilities to perform it, you have to make a sort of reduction. And this is what I argued. I thought the score shows me something that it's like this piece of gold, but you don't really see what's under this skin of, please help me, Grünspan of Rosina, where is she? A sort of rust, yeah? You don't see really. And when I watched the score, I saw that Felsted made sort of compromises. Why? I will tell you. Every instrument has his own idiomatic. So a violin has a different idiomatic, like a flute or an oboe. You see that, if you have the experience, you see that in how the melodies, the rhythms, the jumps or not jumps, and so on, are composed. Also the tonalities. So for example, F major is very typically for a flute, for an oboe, and for a wind instrument. And D major is typically for trumpets. You know, and this time, if you have in the Baroque piece for trumpets, it's always in D major. And this was what's happened in the Jonah. For example, the aria we played right now is in F major, and also the way to the melodies and what happens musically is very typically for flute or for a recorder. If you look at works from Telemann, Bach, Handel, you see exactly the same figures, and I said, this must be for flute. Felsted wrote it in the organ part. It's perfect. It's not a second solution, but it's not. I think it's not the ideal that he had in his mind. And so this was my work, that like a detective, I tried to search and to think what could have been the idea of Felsted, of the best way to perform it, which of course wasn't possible for him in this time, no? And then I saw, wow, this is really in the tradition of Handel, Bach, Telemann, and other great composers of the Baroque. Even some parts I thought, it's like Haydn, Mozart. So he's in between. He has the new tendencies included in his way to compose, but he was really in the tradition of the Baroque composers. Of course, the new style, the new way to compose from the classical instruments, composers like Mozart, Haydn, arrived later to the new world. And and then I started to arrange, and the more I did this, the more I was excited, because I saw, it works, it's fantastic, just to get out of this reduced part, from Felsted, and spread it and make a bigger orchestration, which you can hear. The grand chorus, we are going to perform it at noon. Yes. Of course, this is one solution that I found, one orchestration. There are lots of others, and I think also every situation will be different. So when you get starting by January 17, this score, you can decide by yourself. If you put an oboe or a flute or a saxophone, I don't know, but it makes the whole oratorio more colored with more different instruments. I will say also that Felsted, in his part, which was written, he followed the tradition of the Baroque era. That means he gave us like a skeleton. That means it's a skeleton without meat. The meat is that what the musician has to put by himself. For example, all sort of ornaments or yes, also instrumentation. This is that what the performer has to decide, put it itself. Later on, in the Romantic period, the composers told the musician everything they had to do. They wrote down crescendo, diminuendo, sforzato, piano, everything, even the tempo they gave. But before that, in the Baroque, the musician, the interprets, had more responsibility and more freedom to decide what to do, which tempo, which ornaments, which instrumentation, and so on. And this was also the tradition of Samuel Felsted. He was living in this Baroque thinking. Yeah. And one thing I want to do also is this Baroque thinking. You find it in the music itself. That means one character, a very important thing in the Baroque area was the unequality. Is this the right word? Yeah, not to think in equality. So the French Revolution with fraternité, égalité et liberté, yeah, that égalité was something very, very new for people. People didn't think in that nothing in the world was equal. No, men and women were not equal. Men were not equal. So the king is more important than the ministers, and the citizens are very less important, and the poor farmers are almost no men. So, and also in the music, you found that if you have 4 quarter notes, for instance, they look equal, but the internal worth was not equal. If you write da 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 da, no, it is da da, like speaking, of course. And so the main description of music was music is a sound speech. So you have sound and you have speech, and speech means like speaking. And speaking, of course, you have accentuated syllables and less accentuated. And the same thing is in the music. And this is what I was working also with the musicians to find the idiomatic of the Baroque music, in the sense that we find the idiomatic of Samuel Felsted's music. Yes, I think that was my contribution to this big aim to make a revival of Samuel Felsted, and I do hope. My project is to make also a CD recording. To make a CD recording, I'm looking for sponsors a little bit, and in Germany. Or all over the world. I will make maybe a fun crowding, let's say. And make it, really a professional recording of Samuel Felsted to show the world the beauty of this music. And this is my last word, and I say thank you for listening. Yes? Ms. Facey said that the singing was thought for a countertenor. What is a countertenor? Countertenor was a male voice with sang soprano or alto. So we know that from the castrati in Italy, but this is not the castrati. The countertenor was a very special English from Great Britain male voice had a cultivated falsetto. No. oh, yeah, it's in the upper register, and nowadays we have lots of countertenors. Even you can study this in conservatories or in universities in Europe, and I do hope, it's my aim to make the recording with countertenor, of course. Yes, to find, and also with historical instruments or copy of historical instruments, to find really the sound that Felsted maybe had imagined in his dreams. Thank you again very much for listening. Have a good day.
Thank you, Professor Zimmermann. That was a load of information which we truly appreciate.